Arthritis Broadcast Network fans and friends and viewers. We are so excited to be at the Canadian Rheumatology Annual Scientific Meeting and Allied Health Professions Association meeting, and joining me in our studio, kicking off our interview schedule, is McLean from Hill+Knowlton Strategies. She's based in Ottawa, and given we are here in Ottawa, we thought it would be a great opportunity to kick off our live interviews over the next 2 days with an expert in Ottawa. She probably can help us with some dining reservations too, I might imagine, as well as giving us really great insight into what's happening in government and how that aligns perhaps with the activities that the Arthritis Alliance of Canada is undertaking in terms of advocacy and awareness, program implementation, and things like that. So I'm going to, oh, by the way, my name is Cheryl Koehn. I'm a person with rheumatoid arthritis, and I am the editor-in-chief, if there is such a thing, of Arthritis Broadcast Network and president of Arthritis Consumer Experts. So thank you, Michelle, for jumping in the hot seat and being our guinea pig, actually. We think this is the first disease-specific Facebook Live event, so we're really happy that you could join us. I'm going to hand the mic over to you, and I guess our first real question to you is, what's going on in Ottawa, and how do we see linkages between what the government is trying to do for chronic disease and arthritis, what it may not be doing, and where you think we fit into the big picture?
Great, thanks Cheryl. Thanks for having me as your guest. I'm really excited. I was saying earlier, this is my first Facebook Live interview.
Yes.
So it is an exciting time in Ottawa, and I would argue across the provincial capital as well. It's a great time to be engaged on the issue of health.
Yeah.
And that's partly because the governments are talking to each other again. And the Trudeau government was elected on one of the commitments to be more engaged in health. And I think people maybe understood that to mean that there would be unanimity of opinion across health between levels of government. That's not usually the case when it comes to health. So some people, have been discouraged that there's a lot of negotiations and they aren't concluding as quickly or as fruitfully as people wished. But I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. We have governments that are engaged with each other on top policy issues. That's exciting, and that's frankly been a change in Ottawa, is to have the federal government more meaningfully engaged at the policy table.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing, and I think what that means in terms of opportunity for chronic disease and for people living with arthritis is there's a chance to raise your issues to a receptive audience.
Right.
And for many of us, that's the starting point for a true partnership, is to be heard, to raise our voices so that governments understand what are Canadians looking for. And I think the advice I give to many patient groups is don't let the politicians negotiate your healthcare for you. Be part of the process. And I think through organizations like yours, through initiatives like this, to engage Canadians so they're at the table as well, because their voice is very powerful. And I think not well understood by the public how influential Canadians can be.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick up on that and just say that our viewers here of this interview and all of those that will follow, really important for you to think about sort of what is it that is top of mind for you as a person living with arthritis or any other kind of musculoskeletal issue. What is it that you need, not just in your province, in your country, but in your community? Because I think there's action that can be taken by us, the community, and the community, we're voters. We put government in office, and they are to be held accountable to the voting public. And I think in that arthritis is arguably the largest chronic disease in the country, yet not recognized as a chronic disease by our federal government. Your voice can make a difference. Tell us, Michelle, what kind of things have you seen communities like ours do really at the grassroots level that is effective?
There are all different ways to be engaged with government. I think people sometimes think that you need to be in Ottawa to influence Ottawa.
Yeah.
But in today's world, with the technology like this, you don't need to be in Ottawa to influence Ottawa. So we often encourage groups and individuals to take small actions at the community level. It really does get noticed. So it may be as small as writing a letter to the editor of your community paper, talking about where you see the gaps in your care, or what you'd like to see the province or the federal government do differently. And you, of course, can always meet with your own member of parliament in their riding, and of course the same on the provincial side. So I think it's to demystify engagement of government. It's one of the most important things for Canadians to understand is they can have a voice, and quite easily through today's engagement and communication platforms, it just empowers us all to be more active, more vocal, and more engaged.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are great tips. I think because we've not enjoyed sort of air quotes the same status that other disease groups have enjoyed, it can sometimes be frustrating. You feel like you're not worth counting sometimes, frankly. And I think our arthritis community, patients like me, I'm a person living with rheumatoid arthritis, you know, we sometimes forget that just simply opening up our mouth, telling our neighbor what it is we live with, describing better perhaps to our healthcare provider what our individual and community needs are, I think is really important. And that's the stuff that bubbles up from the grassroots and becomes election issues. They become important issues for our elected officials, and then when we go out, when they go out to polls and hold town meetings and things like that. If you were to say one thing to people with arthritis who are watching today, to us, what should we do to make a difference in our lives?
The one thing I'd encourage everyone to do is share your story. Just building on what you said, Cheryl, governments can't fix a problem they're not aware of or that they don't fully understand. So the more you talk and share your story, the more impact you're going to have. True change will come from a grassroots mobilization and government hearing Canadians and what they want and what they expect. But unless we make that clear, and that needs to be done at an individual level as much as we do as organizations representing people on their behalf. So if it's one thing I would recommend, share your story with your neighbors, with your colleagues. Once we raise the understanding of what impact arthritis truly has in Canada, you'll see governments react, but we have to increase awareness, increase understanding, and we do that most powerfully by sharing stories.
Yeah. You know, thank you for that great direction. It's so valuable, and I think something that we lose sight of, if you've been down in the trenches doing advocacy work, as we have done, you in your own professional life and myself as a volunteer person and as a paid person in arthritis work, we forget that one letter to an elected official represents 100 or represents several hundred. So if a politician hears that there is a problem from one person, they basically do the extrapolation, do the math in their head and go, oh, that might be a problem for so many others in my constituency. So tell your stories, everyone. You can certainly submit them to Arthritis Broadcast Network. You can actually just go to your own local politician and tell them your story in their riding office. It's a very powerful, powerful thing to exercise your voice and tell your experience. And just understand this, that you're not alone. There are nearly 5 million Canadians living with one of over 100 different types of disease. You are part of a brotherhood and sisterhood that is big and strong. And if we unite together, we can actually do the things, I think, and move the dial politically, and in terms of a healthcare implementation way, we can move that dial if we work together and have our voices heard. I just want to thank you, Michelle. I know we grabbed you from the hallway and sat her down here in the hot bird seat. She's been so gracious with her time. Again, Michelle McLean, Vice President, Hill+Knowlton Strategies, based here in Ottawa, and working with the Arthritis Alliance of Canada to help us move our dial. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
And Michelle, there's just an audience online that just wants to say thank you for your idea for sharing the stories.
Oh, great.
Great. I think everyone has a story to tell, and you'd be surprised. Government wants to hear it, so I encourage you to share it.
If there are other questions that come in, A couple of reminders to our viewers. We continue to have interviews over the next 2 days. We have one immediately following this with Janet Yale, who's the President and CEO of the Arthritis Society of Canada. We look forward to speaking with her. We'll take a little break in between. Also, these videos will remain on our Facebook page, so you can revisit them should you wish to bone up again on your GR advice for arthritis. Also, keep the questions coming. We know that everyone who is speaking with us during our interview schedule is happy to come back later via email and answer questions or on Facebook. So thanks to everyone for joining us. We look forward to being part of your viewing life over the next couple of days. Have a nice evening, and we'll be back shortly.